Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon to all of you and welcome. Please feel free to take one of the seats if you see one available. It is my great honor to welcome you here in one of the most lovely and impressive venues of the Vilnius University. Is anyone here for the first time in this very venue? Quite a few of you. I know that it must have taken you a little longer to walk over here. That means that we will celebrate even more, right? What I will do now is I suggest that I will utter the name of the conference, and we have two options. Either you get joyful and applaud for the first time immediately, or it is me encouraging you to do it louder and, more joyful. So you have two options, and you can choose the one that you prefer. On behalf of the Nordic Council of Ministers Office in Lithuania and the Geopolitics and Security Studies Center, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's conference, Shared Values, Shared Security, the Nordic-Baltic Partnership at 35, and the Path Forward. Thank you very much. I know that option one works very well, and it did work this time, so thank you for that. My name is Živilė Kropaitė. I am a journalist, and I will be your moderator throughout the day. That means I will make sure that everything happens on time, that all of the technical details are mentioned, that we know when to talk, when to have breaks, when to network, and content-wise, what we will do today is celebrate 35s of dynamic cooperation and look forward, showcase how the cooperation has changed and is finding new relevance. We will underline that our regional cooperation is fit for purpose and meets the challenges of today. We will also set the stage for discussing why Norden matters and what Nordic-Baltic cooperation can offer as a complement to EU and NATO. We will, today on this stage, have keynote speeches, panels, conversations, welcome speeches as well. There will be a little coffee break in between all that, a chance to network at the very end. Is anyone here just for networking? No one. There's got to be at least a couple of people. I mean, even if you don't tell us that, there will be a chance to do it at the very end after all of the distinguished speakers have spoken, and I'm sure I will introduce them all very, very soon. The conference is being broadcast by LRT, which is the Lithuanian public broadcaster, and its website lrt.lt, so viewers can also follow it online. A couple of tech tips, practical notes before we actually begin. Restrooms are located in the first floor next to the cloakroom, meaning 2 kilometers away. And in the very, very unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the exit signs. I know that you always like to emphasize that in the Nordic countries. This is an uncommon practice in Lithuania, but we do like to do it Northern ways as well. So in a very unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the exit signs. We will also invite you to actively participate in the discussions, and I will actually like to try it out now, this Slido that we often use in conferences, and we will do it in this one. This is a QR code which you can use. Basically, you can use your mobile data because there is no Wi-Fi in this room. We will try it out immediately, so if you want to scan it, or you can also go to slido.com and enter conference as a hashtag, and this will take you to, let's say, a very general first question that we will try out now. I can see that your mobile data is already working, and this will be a multiple choice question. What should be the top priority of Nordic-Baltic cooperation in the next 5 years? There's crisis preparedness, societal resilience as an option. There is green transition, economic competitiveness, energy, and infrastructure. In this case, you are kindly invited to choose one, and then we'll see which dominates. Not saying that any of them is unimportant, but let's see how you all feel. I think it would be fair to conclude that most of you, more than half, actually 2/3 of you, say that crisis preparedness and societal resilience is key. Thank you for your responses. We'll keep that in mind. We'll be working with Slido today just to check your temperature, to check the temperature in the room. And when we have panel discussions, I will also remind you, and the moderators of the panel discussions hopefully will remind you of the chance to ask questions and participate in the panels this way. So thank you for that. That's Slido. I think I've delivered all of the technical tips, and we are kindly moving to welcome speeches, and it is my great honor to invite on stage Director of the Nordic Council of Ministers Office in Lithuania, Ole Andreas Lindeman. Welcome.
Thank you, Živilė. I certainly went for the first option there. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today, speakers and audience, at this beautiful venue, the Historical Center of Learning and Wisdom, Critical Thought and Dialogue, the Vilnius University. Founded, as most of you know, in 1579, one of the oldest and most prominent higher education institutions in Europe. To this university came students from the whole world, meaning at the time Europe, and from some of Europe's more provincial parts, later to be known as the Nordic countries. We are coming together not only to celebrate our achievements over the last 35 years, but to look ahead and to pose questions, hopefully good questions, and to see if they can lead us to answers that may guide us into the next 5, 10, or even 35 years. So say, when you live in a difficult neighborhood, it's good to have good neighbors. It's also good to have good partners. We are truly honored to organize this event together with the Geopolitical and Security Studies Center. We hope you will find new learning, wisdom, and food for critical thoughts in the words of the speakers, the panelists, and the conversations on stage. There will also be an opportunity, as you know now, to pose questions from the auditorium to engage interactively online. I urge you to use this actively. Then 2 words on how we have structured the conference. First, we are fortunate to have with us both the governmental cooperation arm, represented by the Secretary General of the Nordic Council of Ministers, who will speak after me, and then the parliamentary cooperation arm, represented by the President of the Nordic Council. Needless to say, their roles are different, and we will here benefit from the broader Nordic perspective on how shared concerns, common goals, and values are shaping the dynamic policymaking inside the Nordic machinery. Second, to shed light on how the Nordic-Baltic political and geographical space is changing as we speak. In my words, and for the panelists to correct me or elaborate further, the Nordic-Baltic region is getting more broadly defined and with a longer political reach. First, there is an ongoing process with a view to according equal status, equal participation for Greenland, Faroe Islands, and Åland. The Arctic dimension will be more tangible and better heard. Second, Nordic-Baltic political geography stands out today more distinctly towards the east and the west, with liberal democracy and our way of life under attack from the east and challenged from the west. The Arctic and the Baltic perspectives will be mutually more relevant, we think, in the future. In this sense, the distance between Arctic and Baltic becomes shorter, both politically and strategically. The concept of a new north, could draw us more to the south, or the south more towards us. Thirdly, Baltic and the Nordic states are top supporters of Ukraine, and Lithuania stands out by taking on a similar role and responsibility for Ukraine's accession to the EU as the Nordics in the day took on for the Baltics with regard to EU and NATO. I personally find something very important and telling about this. It tells me how far our value community can take us. And I'm very grateful for Alexandra Matvichuk joining us online from Kiev shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, more than sharing a geographical space, we stand out as a region of quality. Values define our region. We are a geopolitical factor taking on more responsibility and playing a more significant role at a time when the world needs this from us. We are a stabilizing political factor, we are recognizable as political entities, and we are staunch supporters of international order and the rule of law. Our vision is to build a Nordic-Baltic region where we can draw more fully on our potential as an economic and political middle power. AI and tech sovereignty must be part of the equation. We cannot protect and assure digital sovereignty by acting alone. Together, we can achieve much more in this costly and high-tech driven field. Ladies and gentlemen, back to dialogue, which is what we hope to achieve here today. In a text by the Lithuanian poet Tomas Venclova, he points out that throughout the historical changes of regimes, cultures, and languages, Vilnius has remained and will remain a city of dialogue. Unquote. Not all cities in the world can say this for themselves. Dialogue is at the core of democracy, and so is curiosity and learning. While this university was founded by Jesuits, indeed to advance the Counter-Reformation, it was a seat of learning characterized by tolerance, with students and teachers of different faiths and from all over, a community that was as international as it was tolerant. There were not only Lithuanians, Poles, Russians, and Ukrainians, but also Englishmen, Scotsmen, Irish, Swedes, and Norwegians, even Finns and Tartars, the chronicle tells. When King Vladislav IV Vasa visited in 1648, he was greeted in 18 languages. Today, there is but one language, unfortunately, I would say. And then, if I turn to another chronicle, more recent, and in the dry language of a diplomatic joint statement issued on 1st February 1991, and I quote, Mr. T. Pedersen and Mr. V. Katkus declared open a Nordic Information Bureau in Vilnius. There they are. Mr. T. Pedersen, and I'm still quoting from the joint statement, Mr. T. Pedersen and Mr. V. Katkus, the statement continues, and they could not even afford to state their full Christian names, we see, welcomed the opening of the Nordic Bureau and expressed their satisfaction with the strengthening of the relations between the Nordic countries and the Republic of Lithuania. And they continue, the opening of the Nordic Information Bureau in Vilnius is seen as a highly important step towards developing close relations and mutually beneficial cooperation. This, ladies and gentlemen, marks the start of our office 35 years ago. And among us today, a little later today, we are privileged to have Valdemaras Katkus with us. So far, he's only on the screen, but please help me in saluting Mr. Katkus. There was a small, I would say this small and somewhat dry diplomatic statement did, in fact, accomplish big things. So I say, thank you, Mr. Katkus. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. I love how you've only spent half a year in Lithuania, but you've already studied all of these most important writers and publicists and all of these old documents. And I know that you follow the happiness index very much, and you always check where the Nordic countries and Lithuania stands. So thank you for your really sincere analysis of all of the Lithuanian documents. I will, as has been announced, invite on stage Secretary General of the Nordic Council of Ministers, Karen Ellemann, with us. Let's give her a warm welcome, a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And dear ministers, all your excellencies, I would just say, all dear friends in our region, commemorating 35 years of close cooperation really gives pause to many types of reflections. And personally, I clearly remember all the stories, all the history, all the details in the history. Stories that my father shared with me, because he was at that time the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs in the early 90s. And he really told me and brought me up in details about the Lithuanian fight for freedom, and also, of course, his involvement in it. How you, as the first of the Soviet republics, broke free, the high price you had to pay for it, and then, of course, soon after, the joy we all shared as your independence was reclaimed. Since then, your country has indeed flourished. You've developed a very strong economy, built a healthy welfare state, and you are a thriving member of the EU and NATO. And you are now at a state we in the Nordics turn to for inspiration on innovation, on financial technology, and of course also on sustainable growth. Even though it didn't pop up on what we focus on, that worries me a bit, but also it was difficult to make a choice, right? Because they are all four important. Well, anyway, today I'm extremely happy to stand here as the representative of the Nordic Council of Ministers and therefore the Nordic governments. We have stood by your side for 35 years, and we will continue to do so in the future. When we established our offices in the Baltic states, in the Baltic countries back in 1991, we had, all of us, I guess, high hopes that the era of big power rivalries, arms race, conflicts, and wars in Europe was coming to an end. Regrettably, Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine and, of course, in general, the whole geopolitical developments over the last few years proved us wrong. It has really demonstrated why we need strong cooperation between like-minded countries and allies. And none are closer to us in the Nordics than our Baltic neighbors. Our Nordic-Baltic cooperation is founded on history, on geography, and of course also on shared values. And it combines active bottom-up collaboration between civil society actors and the business community with close governmental cooperation across almost all areas and all sectors. Shared values, shared security. That is the title of today's conference, and I really think that it says it all, because our shared values are the core of the Nordic-Baltic cooperation and what brings resilience and security. Our shared values provide societal cohesion and trust, but I also believe in values as something very practical too. Values inspire solutions in our increasingly complex and uncertain world. if we want to remain on top of happiness and democracy index, if we want to lead in productivity and growth, if we want to boost innovation, we need equal opportunities and inclusive structures, and our values are what makes us prosperous. Today, these values, democracy, openness, human rights, and respect for the rule of law, are values that are indeed in need to be protected. And I like to say that what we are building and maintaining, that protection, I look at it through 3 C's: collaboration, community, and culture. And let me just elaborate, because first, collaboration. Some weeks ago, I attended the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women at UN in New York. And what I witnessed there, and I guess what a lot of us see in many international forums, is indeed a pushback against the achievements made over the last decades towards more equality, equity, and sustainability. A pushback on gender equality, on climate actions, on human rights, and on multilateralism. It's not often that I quote a person who I later today will join for a conversation, but today I have chosen to do that because a few years ago, a very strong Lithuanian woman stood before the United Nations General Assembly, and she said, I quote her, "On all major challenges, there is simply no alternative to working together." Her Excellency Dalia Grybauskaitė was right then, and she's even more right today. And may I add that her point is even more accurate for us in the Baltic Nordic region. We are small states individually, but we are a force to reckon with when we work together. And that's why collaboration is my first word on C. My second one is community. As the saying goes, Ole just said it before, when the crisis hits, the best thing you can do is to know your neighbors. For 35 years, our office in Vilnius and also in the other Baltic states has cooperated closely, and here in Vilnius, cooperated closely with Lithuanian authorities and society on a vast number of fields: democracy building, cultural heritage, environmental issues and energy, on health and education, and all efforts that contribute to a stronger community. Just a few examples. Right now, the 4IN program is gathering local and national authorities, as well as civil society, from all Nordic and Baltic countries to exchange best practices on integration of immigrants and refugees from Ukraine. And later this year, another example, the 3rd Nordic-Baltic Youth Summit will be arranged in Tallinn. And this forum is a place where we gather youth from all Nordic and Baltic countries to discuss society, to discuss life, to discuss democracy. Because nothing can be more important than giving the youth a voice and also introduce them to respectful and civilized debate in a world that is marked so much by polarization and disinformation. So these 2 examples, I know they're just tiny drops in a sea of Nordic-Baltic activities, but they strengthen community building and thereby our societal resilience here and now, and that's why community is my second C. And then my third C, culture. Well, let's not forget that authoritarian regimes rarely start with tanks. They begin by capturing the information space, silencing independent media, reshaping culture, and undermining public debate. So when people can no longer trust what they hear or express what they think, our democracies become vulnerable. So to protect and support free and independent culture is therefore a fundamental part of our societal resilience. Around our region, the Nordic Council of Ministers arrange Nordic-Baltic network meetings for countering disinformation, protecting journalists, strengthening public service media, and improving media literacy. And for several years, our office here in Vilnius has supported independent media actors from Belarus, often in exile, because we believe it is crucial to provide the Belarusian people with credible and impartial information. And across sectors, the Nordic governments agree that cultural cooperation and investments in democracy-building activities are essential for regional resilience. And that's why culture is my final C. My father has now passed, but indeed his words from the early 90s are as relevant then as they are today. He said very clearly, Nordic-Baltic cooperation is essential for stability, for growth, and for security in the Baltic Sea region. In a few hours, I'm crossing the Baltic Sea, going back to Copenhagen, but I do so with the firm belief that yes, we may be separated by a sea, but we are united in our belief and support to democracy and human rights. Yes, we do live in an extremely strange world right now, but we know that you cannot build anything lasting on fear. You build on confidence, openness, and the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. And yes, our shared values may be challenged right now, but I know that we will stand our ground and defend them, and doing that together. So thank you very much, and let's all have a good conference.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you very much for emphasizing and supporting media freedom as well. It is very important in today's context of Lithuania. You have also mentioned the 3 C's, collaboration, community, and culture. We will, I believe, dwell on the second one now, because Karen has mentioned independence fights and the importance of good neighbors during the crisis. We will emphasize civil society, NGOs' role during the crisis even more now, and we'll do that by listening to a video keynote from the Ukrainian human rights lawyer and civil society leader, head of the non-profit organization Center for Civil Liberties, Nobel Peace Prize receiver in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexandra Matvichuk is welcoming us on the screen. So let's have a look at our screens.
My name is Alexandra Matvichuk. I'm a human rights lawyer. I'm documenting war crimes in this war that Russia has launched against Ukraine. It's an honor for me to address to the participant of conference of Nordic-Baltic Partnership. Nordic-Baltic community, it's not just about geography, but first and foremost about shared identity and shared values that we in Ukraine are also fighting for. I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but the world order based on UN Charter and international law has collapsed. This system was created past century after the Second World War to prevent wars and mass violence, but now just stalling, reproducing ritualistic movements. For obvious reason, even my smartphone has an expiration date. This system has never been reformed. We would never return to the status quo. Change is new norm. And this Russian war of aggression against Ukraine will define our common future, because it will determine what would recognize as accessible. This dramatic time tests all of us for true leadership, true courage, and true responsibility. And I see as one of the main problems that it was only Russia who was always proactive. Russia committed something horrible in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world that presented it like new normality and pushed international community to reckon with it. And international community was only reactive. And that is why we are here in this historical moment when Putin openly declared that he is ready for war with Europe. We must develop our common strategy. We must return initiative. And Nordic Baltic community can play an essential role in it. 5 years ago, I was in Kiev when Russian troops tried to circle my city. I refused to evacuate, and with a part of my team, we continued our work on the ground. And that time, it was the war in the form of a long line of Russian tanks storming Kiev and other cities and settlements. But now, it's completely another type of the war. It's a war of unmanned machines, mass drones attacks, total transparency of the battlefield, and quick and cheap long-range distance weapons. The whole military experience of past century became irrelevant. And that is why Ukraine is not just a beneficiary of international support. Ukraine is an integral part and a strong contributor to European collective security. And there is a growing expectation from Ukrainian civil society that Nordic and Baltic partners move towards more systematic, more structural engagement with Ukraine across their regional cooperation formats, not just as a response to war, but as a part of shared democratic space. And our main lessons learned is the following. People have power. We get used to thinking through the categories of big powers, states, interstate organizations, but ordinary people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Ordinary people can create history. I would never wish anyone to go through our experience, because war is horrible. But these dramatic times provide us an opportunity to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make difficult but right choices, to take burden of responsibility and to help each other. And I'm here to say that despite everything, the story of Ukraine and Ukrainian struggle for freedom, it's a life-affirming story, because these dramatic times raise hope, and our future is not just unclear, it's also not pre-written. This means that we still have a chance to fight for future we want for us and for our own children. And I'm here to say that we still have a hope. And hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine. Hope, it's a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning.
Ordinary people can create history. People are power. Neighbors are power. Civil societies are power. Stronger together, testing the Nordic-Baltic cooperation model after 35 years. This is the topic of the panel to come. And I would like to invite the distinguished panelists to join me here on stage and pick one of the chairs. I think what I'll do is I'll invite them all one by one, and then when I utter their names, just give them a round of applause as we welcome them warmly on this stage. Secretary General of the Nordic Council, Kristina Hafos, is with us. Let's welcome her. Thank you. You're the first one, so you can, I think, maybe closest to the photograph would be the best option. A representative of Greenland, former member of the Danish Parliament and chair of the Arctic Parliamentarians, Aya Chemnis Driefer, is with us as well. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. I have not seen him, but I'm sure someone would have informed me. Yes, you are here. Ambassador of Lithuania to Sweden, His Excellency Linas Linkevičius. Welcome. Director of the Institute of International Affairs, Iceland, Pia Hansson. Senior Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, Matti Pesso. Welcome. Let us also invite Ulle to moderate this discussion. We'll give you a big warm applause as well. There will be a Slido option if you have your code scanned, and you can use it here. You can ask your question throughout the panel. It will be approximately an hour-long discussion, and if you've got any questions or comments, you can gladly participate, right, Ulle? Okay, so I'm going to leave you to it and have a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Živilė, and a warm welcome to the panelists. We have prepared us a little bit. We have thought that we will make the most of this hour. I'm sure it's going to pass quickly. And I have asked the panel if we could start with a view from the Arctic with both Kristina and Pia. And with the view from the Arctic, if we could have 5 minutes from each of you on how the Nordic-Baltic cooperation is seen from the Arctic today, and is it fair to say that the external pressure from the East and West is making the Nordic-Baltic political space, as it were, tighter somehow? And what are the similarities you see today with the Baltic states? Should we start with you, Aya, and then we go to Kristina afterwards?
Yes, and thank you very much for having me, first and foremost. First and foremost, I want to say that I used to be an MP, and I decided not to run recently. And it's it's one of the first engagements actually that I have after not being an MP for more than 12 years. So it's great to be here. It's easier to speak more freely when you're not an MP, not representing a party in that sense. So you know, the pressure and the threat that Greenland has been experiencing from the US is still there. I think it's going to be a marathon, not a short sprint. And therefore, I think it's not only important to have neighbors and know your neighbors, but also to have friends and to have your neighbors as friends. So that's why I think it's so important to be here today, to have the dialogue. And we have a saying which is nothing about us without us, nothing about Greenland without Greenland. And it actually puts a pressure on us because we're not that many people in Greenland, because then we need to be present in many of the discussions. But I think the Nordic cooperation, the Baltic cooperation is equally as important for us in Greenland as well. So thank you very much for having us. I don't want to compare Greenland and Ukraine, but maybe say a few words, because I think what is true for both Ukraine and Greenland is our security is also your security. What happens in Greenland will also affect, other countries in the Nordic, in the Baltic, and the same goes with Ukraine as well. And that's why I think it's so important to stand closely with your friends on these matters, to stand very clear on these principles, that the frames that we have, the respect that we have for the different borders needs to be respected. And we live in a time where, big states, they think that they can just overtake the small states. And this is really something that is important for us to stand very clear on the principles of, the world order that we buy in on. So we're in a time of a world disorder. And the way that we used to play by the rules was, the rule of law. It was respecting the frames and so on. So this is really a challenging time. And I think when we look back in history in 5, 10, 15 years, this will be a time that will be important to really understand, because it will really affect how things will move forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Aya. And then I must admit, and excuse me everyone, at a critical time in reading my own script, I did not have my glasses on. Actually, I was thinking you, Pia, to follow up on the Arctic, and then we'll come back to you, Christina. So please, and excuse me.
Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for the invitation. It's so great to be back in Vilnius. I think it's more than 10 years ago that I visited Vilnius first, so it's really great to be here. Also on this occasion, of course, because it kind of brings back feelings of pride, I'd say, from a small state like Iceland that was first to recognize the restored independence of Lithuania 35 years ago. So, it's good to, and I really resonate with the stories that Karen brought, because having heard from the Icelandic foreign minister at the time, Jón Baldvin, that worked quite closely with Uffe Ellemann-Jensen at the time, it's always kind of good to reflect on those things. Not least because the situation is a little bit more difficult today, and we feel a little bit more concerned about what's going on in the world, that's for sure. So, and actually, just to add one more anecdote on a personal note, if I may, in '91, I was actually working in media at the time when the independence was coming about here, and I was extremely pregnant with my first child, so I always remember the year as well, That's kind of the way it goes. But let me start with a simple observation. So Nordic-Baltic cooperation has been one of Europe's quiet success stories over the past 35 years. But it was perhaps built for a different time. What began as a Nordic effort to support Baltic independence has now become a partnership operating in a far more complex and dangerous environment, shaped by NATO enlargement, EU integration, and Russia's war against Ukraine. So the real question today is not whether we are stronger together, but whether this model is still fit for purpose. From an Icelandic and West Nordic perspective, there are two important points I would like to make. First, and that really resonates with Aya as well, small states matter. And in that definition, I'm certainly talking about all the Nordic states, as well as the Baltic states. Iceland has no standing army yet through NATO it plays a critical role in North Atlantic security, especially as the GEOC gap regains importance. And for those that are not familiar with that term, it refers to Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, and the oceans in between. So, second, let me also add that the West Nordic dimension is often missing from the conversation. Greenland and the Faroe Islands are becoming increasingly central. This is bad when you have big papers. Sorry about that. To Arctic and transatlantic geopolitics. And recent developments, outrageous statements by the current US president have certainly cemented that importance. So if we are serious about the future, we should be thinking not just in terms of the Nordic-Baltic 8, but something broader and more inclusive. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has fundamentally changed the nature of our cooperation. We have moved from a model focused on stability and integration to one focused on deterrence and defense readiness. With Finland and Sweden joining NATO, the region is now more aligned than ever militarily. But this raises a key tension. How do we strengthen hard security without losing the core Nordic strengths: trust, openness, and democratic resilience? Because ultimately, cooperation is not just about institutions, it's about social societies. It's about the societies. The Baltics bring frontline experience in cyber and information threats. The Nordics bring deep institutional trust and governance capacity. Together, this creates a powerful model of societal resilience. But we should not take that for granted. Public awareness of Nordic-Baltic cooperation remains relatively low, and long-term success depends on maintaining public trust and engagement. Finally, we're seeing a growing convergence between the Arctic and the Baltics. Climate change, security concerns, and infrastructure vulnerabilities are linking these regions in new ways. Iceland sits right in the middle of this emerging strategic space as a bridge between the Arctic and Northern Europe, a founding member of NATO, and perhaps now moving toward EU membership. That's all I'll say on that issue for now. Time will tell. Iceland has a lot to offer in connecting the West Nordic and Arctic region to the Nordic-Baltic region. So yes, Nordic-Baltic cooperation has been a success. But the real test is ahead. The question is not just whether we are stronger together, but whether we are prepared to adapt politically and societally to remain stronger together under pressure. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. And when I now pass the word to Christina and ask what scenarios then the parliamentarians, the Nordic Council is preparing for, I would really hope that you could take up some of these challenging remarks from Pia, that we are in difficult times, whether we are fit actually to deal with the challenges before us and the real tests ahead. And if there is such a convergence that Pia mentioned. So please, Christina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ole, and totally agree what Aya and Pia said here. And I also want to start by thanking you, all of you at the Nordic Council of Ministers office here in Lithuania for inviting us at the Nordic Council also to participate in this important event, and good to be with so many Baltic and Nordic friends here also. First, maybe I could tell you a little bit about the Nordic Council and what we are, because a council could be so many things, but the Nordic Council is the Nordic Parliamentarian Cooperation. It's 87 parliamentarians elected by the 8 parliaments of Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Åland. I think I got all of them. And they meet and act a lot like a national parliament, but they adopt recommendations for the Nordic governments. And one of the closest allies of the Nordic Council, which has been, it was actually established back in 1952, shortly after the Second World War, because the Nordic parliamentarians saw we needed strong organizations to create stability over time. So next year we have 75 years jubilee. And one of the closest partners is the Baltic Assembly, which is a cooperation between the 3 Baltic parliaments, as probably most of you know. We were told that after the Baltic states regained independence in the 90s, the parliaments looked to the Nordics and wanted to establish something that looked like the Nordic Council. And since then, we have had regularly meetings between the Nordic Council parliamentarians and the Baltic parliamentarians. They meet several times a year, actually. So it's a very strong dialogue platform between the Baltic parliamentarians and the Nordic parliamentarians, just to set the scene. Sometimes people ask, like, yeah, what do they do, these parliamentarians, other than come with recommendations for the governments and ask questions? But I see these platforms of people meeting is getting more and more important. I often say if they shouldn't meet to talk there, where should they talk then? And in these uncertain times, we need these platforms more than ever. And we also see that the Baltic and the Nordic parliamentarians want to meet more and more, and that's also the way to create even stronger friendship, even stronger partnerships. We have also a document of prioritized themes. I won't have time to go into that, so I think I'll wait with that and go straight to the which scenarios we see. I must say, we have to prepare for many different scenarios, and that's what our parliamentarians also do. As we have heard a lot, and we talk about a lot, everything is changing so rapidly now that we have to adapt constantly. One issue that we are, of course, focusing on now that we have debates between parliamentarians is threats against democracy, which we see as a huge problem. But also in general, the climate crisis, how can we meet this crisis stronger together? And in general, all these geopolitical tensions. What we are seeing is this increasing rivalry between the bigger countries and states like the US, China, also Russia. And we see the Nordics in the middle of this. Especially we have seen also consequences for Greenland. And here we see that the Nordic parliamentarians together with the Baltic can make a difference. We have had several official statements, both from the Nordic and Baltic parliamentarians together. And in generally, I just have this feeling that we always, of course, need friends and good friends, but we see that in uncertain times, we need these friendships even more. It's not just nice to have, it's need to have. Yeah, so maybe if we have to go further, I could continue for a long time, because what we in general see is this pressure both from, of course, the east, from Russia. We see it changes in the north, the Arctic. It influences both the whole Nordic region, the Baltic countries. We see destabilization in Europe with, unfortunately, some countries that don't want a Europe that is built on the same values and that we in the Baltics and Nordic want. And we see threats, unfortunately, from the US also against even one of our Nordic countries. And that makes this close cooperation between the Nordic and Baltic countries even more important. I think I'll stop there and we continue the discussion.
Thank you, Christina. And we can come back to several of these points. Scenario thinking these days is not easy, as we are even standing between Iran and elections in Hungary. But on that note, I would like to turn to Finland now, and to you, Matti. I think it would be interesting to have the view from Finland, and in particular with regard to the fact that you have then been members of NATO since 2023. And how does this change Finland's interest in Nordic-Baltic cooperation?
Yes. Thank you, Ole. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be here. I've been once to this campus as a student, magnificent place, and I never thought that I would return here as a speaker, so it's an honor. Yes, indeed, Finland joining NATO almost exactly 3 years ago in 2023 was a transformative moment for Finland, but also for regional cooperation. And obviously, like when Sweden joined a year after, had a equal big effect. Before, when Sweden and Finland were partners, not allies, there were certain constraints on regional cooperation and not dialogue, but now those caveats and constraints are gone, and it has facilitated like deeper, qualitatively different collaboration across different formats, both ad hoc and more institutionalized. And what I constantly hear from diplomats here in the region is that everyday cooperation and the exchange of views within the Nordic-Baltic 8 has intensified considerably in recent years. And this is also likely the case at the political level among elected decision makers. When it comes to regional cooperation frameworks, I'd say that we should, although there's a lot of potential, we should still resist the temptation to create new structures. So we should make the most of the ones we already have, and those formats are indeed plentiful. There's Nordic Council of Ministers, Nordic Baltic 8, the Council of Baltic Sea States, Nordefco, GEF, and whatnot. So we have structures. And it can also be a strength because each of these structures have been tailored to a different purpose, and also they facilitate a lot of informal dialogue among the regional stakeholders. So I would argue that we have sufficient structures in place to facilitate cooperation among the Nordic Baltic 8 on foreign security and defense matters. But what I do think we need is to consolidate cooperation, coordination, and dialogue at the broader Northern European level. So the NB8 Nordic Baltic countries are clearly the hard core of Northern Europe, I would say. But all 8 countries are either small or medium-sized. And I fully agree with my co-panelist and think that small states matter, but still it is important for the Nordic Baltic 8 to bind also larger powers, larger European powers, in particular the UK, Germany, and Poland, to the Northern European group, and to ensure that their views on security questions are as closely aligned as possible with those of the Nordic Baltic 8, whose views aren't of course identical, but still very similar on key questions of European security. Before concluding, let me just flag 3 particular questions where the Nordic Baltic Group and the broader Northern European community matter most right now. First, there is Europe's approach to Russia, maybe evolving if and when the war ends. So the NB8 is quite clear-eyed about Russia as a long-term and acute security threat. And I think there is a rather broadly shared view that any potential outreach towards Moscow should be closely coordinated and also at first limited in scope. Secondly, Ukraine's future role in the European security architecture is a major issue, and I fully agree with the Alexander Matvichak on the importance of Ukraine finding a stable role in the European security structure. And I think the NBA, although there are maybe different positions on NATO membership, they still want Ukraine to be as closely aligned with European and Euro-Atlantic structures as possible and as political conditions allow. And then the last question is the US. So there is clearly now an expectation in the US that Europeans should assume a larger share of conventional defense burden. So here in this region, we need to figure out how to do more regionally while working to keep the US constructively, and I underscore the word constructively, engaged in European security. Thank you.
Thank you, Matti, and to everyone. We will return to Belarus a little later, but now I'd like to turn to you, Linas, and then with a view on it all from Lithuania, or in your case, Lithuania in Sweden, as it were. But if we could have that Lithuanian voice on the importance for you of Nordic-Baltic cooperation, and maybe I could ask it thus: do you want to be Nordic, and how Nordic do you want to be?
Maybe a bit too cold, I don't know. But first time also, thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to take part in this event. And I'm also happy to be back to Vilnius. I like visiting Vilnius, so thank you for this opportunity. When it comes to the way we went together, I'm the only one from Baltic states in this panel, so I have pleasure to say thank you and to pay a tribute to our Nordic friends for our success story, our common success story. But when it was started, it was really slippery. It was a bit risky. Risky first for you, not for us, because we are not experienced at that time. We didn't know where going, how does it look like, how much does it cost, and definitely it was not so easy. But you took it with patience, with responsibility. That was very important. And you know, when talking about risk, I'd like to say that before our recognition, you know that Nordics were first among those who recognized Lithuania. Iceland was the first, then was Denmark. And before recognition, it was very difficult to have these international contacts. And Professor Landsbergis went to NATO and wanted to meet NATO Secretary General. It was a big headache to our friends what to do because Lithuania is not recognized. And then it was hard discussions, I presume, and a meeting took place in Danish delegation. So that was also first step towards NATO, dialogue with NATO. At that time, we even dreamed to be neutral, by the way, at the very beginning, and quite soon we understood the only way to get to the collective security institutions. And again, Nordics were very helpful, and as young defense minister at that time, I can tell you that it was enormous support from Nordic countries. Again, it was division of labor. Finns more supporting Estonia, Swedes more supporting Latvia, as it is now, sending battalion, hand forward presence troops, NATO troops to granting security. In our case, in Germany, framework nation, but at that time, it was Denmark who supported us a lot, and I was very grateful to my colleague at that time, Hans Hagerup, with whom we brought our peacekeepers first from Baltic states to former Yugoslavia for peacekeeping mission in '94, and then launched multilateral project Baltic Battalion, which was well known around the world, by the way. If somebody was speaking about Baltic states, saying something nice, so one sentence was always about Baltic Battalion as a role model cooperation, because there was opportunity for us Baltic states to coordinate our needs, which was, believe not easy at all. And we asked our donors also to coordinate. Then Denmark helped this ground troops cooperation. Also, the Defense College, which now still is in Tartu in Estonia, still active as a part of educational chain in NATO system. Norway was helping airspace control and centers not far from Kaunas, my native city, and still operational and still active in conducting and helping to exercise NATO air police mission about Baltic states. So everybody had something to do at that time. And as I said, it was risky at the same time, very meaningful, because what was done, 95%, I would say, still used quite properly after so many years. So that was one point I want to say. Also, it's also not a secret probably for you. You are very polite people. You're always smiling and saying how we are nice, but at the very beginning probably you were a bit suspicious looking at us and try to discipline, try to talk. And this format was called 5+3. Let's be serious. You were meeting, making this serious business, taking decisions, then inviting Baltic states for family photo. And, and that was very nice, 5+3 picture. And yeah, so we wanted, of course, we wanted much more. And it moved very consistently, I would say. It was not revolution, it was evolution. And the format formatted and changed from 5+3 to Nordic Baltic 8. And now I'm coming to your question about Nordics. So what we feel in at least I know in Stockholm, maybe not so much in Helsinki, I don't know elsewhere, but in Nordic Baltic format is very important for Sweden. I'm not a spokesman of Swedish government, but I'm telling what I'm hear from the debates in parliament, statements of political leaders, I believe current government and opposition, what's very important to say. So Euro-Atlantic region and Nordic-Baltic region. I believe this is valuable, very important. And also what we are doing, regardless all these formats, I very much agree with our Finnish colleagues saying that too many formats, too many institutions, let's make sure that those current are working properly. It's a big challenge, by the way. And this is the point that I'd like to say, that this Nordic Baltic becoming center of attraction, kind of gravity, because international organizations undergoing, if you would agree with me, stress tests, and not all of them very successful. Starting from United Nations, let's not insult anybody, but we have seen the role of this organization facing the crisis and war in Ukraine and whatever. And that was difficult. Also, we see problems within the European Union to take decisions properly on time and to make them efficient and working, because of veto right of some countries, because of some resistance of what we're doing, and we are becoming a very kind of weak player globally. Although potentially European Union is a very strong player, could be economically, like economical issues, development projects, humanitarian assistance, but when it comes to the moderation of crisis, safeguard prevention of crisis, it's not possible simply because we're not capable. So we have to do our homework. And everybody looking to the countries of really willing and able to meet, to discuss, to take decisions and to implement. And Nordic Baltic becoming, I believe, the group of countries which a glue between NATO and European Union, because all are members of NATO now, not all EU, but quite friendly to EU, let's say that. And this is also very important. And trying to be this role model of multilateral cooperation, trying to save these organizations which are undergoing the stress test and not very successfully. And now I'm coming to this extended format. So at least in Stockholm, it's becoming very popular, Nordic Baltic plus. It's Germany and Poland. In previous time, I remember it was also for Netherlands and UK extension. When being foreign minister in New York, I remember there were also a willingness from countries like Japan to meet Nordic Baltic. It's not regular, but ad hoc it's taking place. So what that means, coming back to our Stockholm, so to say, kitchen, Nordic Baltic 8 plus Poland plus Germany, we're sometimes calling New North. So it's not about the titles, it's about nature. So New North emerging, maybe with addition, now I'm just not talking as ambassador probably, I shouldn't do that, but Weimar trio. Let's add France, right? Which now becoming also relevant. So these eight Nordic Baltic, 3 Weimar trio, it's a big force, and not just as a manpower even, not only economically. So if we'll move together, if we'll show some initiative, so we will feel not just Nordic, but those capable to act, to produce deeds, not only slogans and statements.
And photos.
I'm very, very happy that we are in the situation like this.
Well, thank you. Now, you will have an opportunity to comment on this, because we will continue the debate here. But I have put before you a very difficult task. Now I'm giving everyone 2 minutes to answer the same question. And that is about what we heard from Ukraine, the strong voice from civil society in Ukraine, and what we could learn from that, and what that could tell us about how to handle Belarus in the future. Because obviously, after a peace, hopefully on Ukraine's terms, this year, next year, let's hope for the best, there will still be Belarus. Belarus will be an agent for power projection, threat projection, hybrid attacks still, and not least against Lithuania and other Baltic states. Now, my question is to you, how do you look at this? What have we learned from Ukraine? How can it be applied on our knowledge regarding Belarus? And will the Nordic Council Minister then be fit for this purpose? Because obviously Russia will continue to test our democratic resilience and test our institutions. Could we start with you, Matti?
Sure. Say the biggest lesson from Ukraine is that we should never, or we should avoid as a Nordic-Baltic group and as a NATO, a war of attrition with Russia, given its humanitarian and other costs. And the best way to avoid it is to ensure that Russia has no incentive to wage one, meaning maintaining credible deterrence along the entire NATO-Russia front line. I think Ukraine, Belarus is very much part of this deterrence equation from NATO's point of view. And by the way, military-capable Ukraine anchored in Western security architecture would be a direct contribution to that deterrence. So supporting Ukraine, therefore, is not an act of charity for us. It's a core security and defense policy interest for Northern Europe. On Belarus, I fully agree that we should treat it as a potential Russian threat vector. I think this is a question where the threat perceptions of the Nordic-Baltic aid is not entirely aligned, and it just has everything to do with geography. So within the group, the question perhaps is often sidelined, and here, particularly Lithuania and Latvia could actively keep the issue on the agenda, and the rest of the group should take their assessment of the situation seriously and to an extent at least defer to their judgment on the best approach.
Thank you. Then we jump to the other side of our geography. Pia, please.
Yeah, certainly the other side of the geography. So our peripheral position is really part of what kind of makes our position and our opinion on what it is that goes on this side. So for Icelanders, I think, of course, you do need to recognize that we do not have a military. Our thinking on these issues is therefore shaped by that. But at the same time, being a founding member of NATO, we are, of course, completely committed to the supporting Ukraine and doing what we can in terms of civil operations and supporting that. But I totally agree with Matti, what he's been saying here. I think it's extremely important that we remember what the situation calls for right now. And it's the same thing as it always has been. There has to be unity in this. We have to be certain that we're all pulling together to be able to deter as much as we can and not get into continued confrontations with Russia. But at the same time, courage is something I'm calling for as well. So whatever we can do to speak up and really be strong and united in that, I think is extremely important.
Thank you. Thank you. Aya, would you like to continue here?
Yes, I think the greatest lesson is that no one can stand alone. We need each other. I think that's a good thing. And I think, it's great that the family photo is growing. Greenland and the Faroe Islands and Åland would like to be an equal member of the Nordic Council as well. So I think that's a good thing. I think it's important to invite us in order to make sure that we stand strong together. But I also think that one lesson, just from the panel here, we agree upon most things. And many of the values that we have together are actually something that, we can all agree upon. But these are also values that are being challenged. Whether it's democracy, whether it's the rule of law, whether it's human rights, we can see that United Nations is challenged. We can see that NATO is challenged. And just the fact that, coming from the Arctic and 7 out of the 8 Arctic states are members of NATO, but what if US is drawing out? And if we don't have respect for each other, and just speaking from a Greenlandic point of view, and just the fact that, my home country is being talked about as a big chunk of ice from an American president. This is really challenging the cooperation. And we're part of the North American continent, as part of the geography. And there's no doubt that the placement of Greenland is strategically very interesting and going to be very important for many, many reasons. But I think it's so important to figure out proactively, how do we handle this when our core values are being challenged? And especially by someone who is maybe the greatest partner that we used to have back in the days, but not necessarily is going to be that in the future. So I think these are, question marks, and also from my side, it's always very important for me to be proactive. When Greenland is really being challenged, almost daily and sometimes hourly in new ways, it's very important for us to, be aware of what is the worst case and what is the best case. And maybe just to give you one example from back home in Greenland, because I was speaking to this teacher and she was saying the children in the public school, they would like to keep the radio on so they know if there's going to be a war in Greenland, so they can be, on time. So this is really, the pressure that we're feeling in Greenland. And it's, it's always there in the back of our minds. And every morning when I check the news, it's like, how is this day going to be? I think I have done around 4,000 interviews in the last 15 months, just trying to really push back on what Trump is doing towards our home country of Greenland. So it's, I think we need to think differently when we talk about cooperation, because we can easily agree that we would like to cooperate. We can easily agree upon the values, but this is being challenged from the outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see we have to move on with the clock also, but I would like to ask the same question to you, Christina, and then to Linas. And there's one final question also, so please let us have time for that. Christina.
Thank you so much. And also thank you, Aya, for putting such strong words on this. If I just can answer this, what's happening in Greenland, I think it's such a good picture of how challenging all the things that are happening in the world are. It's not just about Ukraine or Belarus. It's a changing world order, and we are facing the pressure from so many sides, and now also inside the Nordic region and towards Greenland. I went to Greenland for some meetings in the parliament here in February and talked to some people there, and I thought this one incident when all the power went out in Nuuk one day, and they told about how scared they got and how many in Nuuk really felt, okay, now it's happening. Now someone is really coming for us. It said something about the times we're living in and the challenges we have, but I think the answer to meet these challenges as well as possible is to stand together with friends, with allies. I think the message that we got from Ukraine, as you asked for, was very strong. I liked emphasis on people have power and ordinary people can change and make history. And I think that small countries, it's the same. Small countries can make a big difference, and that's, I think, what we really can do together, the Baltic and the Nordic countries together, because, yeah, I come from the Faroe Islands, a small Nordic country, but usually when we see on the international scene, all the Nordic and Baltic countries are small. But when we're seen together, we see that very strongly, the Nordic countries, and also especially when we have Baltic parliamentarians also with us, we are listened to. We are not small anymore. And I think it can play a very stabilizing factor also in the Arctic towards these big players, because sometimes the small countries are not seen as such a big threat. I'd just like to also inform a little bit about how the Nordic Council has worked with Ukraine to support.
Okay, but I think you have to do it quickly because Živilė is sending me looks.
Yeah. No, our Nordic parliamentarians are trying in any way to show strong support for Ukraine. We have had statements several times. We had Zelensky as the guest speaker for one of our sessions. We had also had Ruslan Stefanchuk, the Speaker of the Parliament, at our last session in Stockholm. We are having regularly dialogue, and we are also trying not to forget Belarus. It's very important to the Nordic Council also have focus on the democratic opposition in Belarus, and that's why the Nordic Council adopted an international strategy, also stating that the democratic opposition in Belarus should be supported in any way possible. And Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was also a guest speaker at one of our sessions, and we are looking right now together with the Nordic Council presidency this year, which is from Finland, and you will hear more from our president in a short while, Ville. how we could establish a kind of a conference, table discussion together on the Belarus issue, so we can see how can we, on a parliamentarian, and also by recommending the Nordic governments and hopefully also the Baltic governments support the democratic opposition in Belarus even more. Hoping for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I did not hear you, Linus, on this quickly. Lithuania is closest of all to both Belarus and Ukraine.
Now, if quickly, so Ukraine is the only country which now fighting in real terms with the biggest evil of current century. And that means a lot because this fight is existential in importance, not just for Ukraine, but for us as well. So it's our moral duty and political task to make all possible to get them in, which is not easy going, as we all know. It also has to do with this decision-making process within the EU, with many other bureaucratic and not only bureaucratic reasons, so we have to solve it. And our task to make it possible. On Belarus, if it's shortly, it's a major ally of Russia in the fight with Ukraine. It should be treated accordingly. And it would be naive to think that if Russia would win and the situation will be solved in Belarus or somehow separately, it's not possible because too dependent. And this remainings of sovereignty and independence of that country, if they still exist, mean not much. So we have to help opposition. We cannot make revolution for them. It's not our task and our duty and our dream. Obviously, they have to do themselves. But to make sure that we can help them as much as possible to provide refuge, to help maybe morally, financially, what we are doing, what we can do. And this task for all Nordic Baltic countries, I believe. So this is in short.
Then I have one last question for you. It's a yes or no question. And that is, when you are invited here in 5 years for the 40-year anniversary, will we have the same discussion? Yes or no? Matti, please.
I think yes, with the recognition that there's been a qualitative leap in cooperation.
Thank you. Pia?
I don't know. Should I be optimistic now or not? Probably yes.
That is not so optimistic.
I don't want me to say anything more. No, I don't know. But if I may add just a little bit, because I've been thinking a lot about a word, and I think that I mentioned it before, and it's about courage. And I'm just hoping that we will get to that point, that we actually see political leadership globally really stepping up to the plate and showing courage. And that really I get reminded of all the time when I think about my Greenlandic neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Linus?
Yes, same candid discussion.
Thank you.
I would say no. I think we're going to have different discussions. I think it will be a different world that we're looking into in 5 years.
Kristina?
Both yes and no. It will be a different world, definitely, but I also see that hopefully, and I believe that in 5 years, this Nordic and Baltic cooperation will have grown even stronger, because what we see is that the international organizations are unfortunately getting weaker, but that demands even stronger regional cooperation. And we see both from our Nordic governments and our Nordic parliamentarians and also the Baltic parliamentarians and governments wanting very strongly to ensure a stronger cooperation. So that will hopefully be the big difference when we meet next time. But of course, we would wish for a more peaceful world and that Ukraine could be free and so on. But as it looks now, it's very hard to see which way things will develop. But we have to stick together, and with close cooperation, the future looks brighter than if we didn't have this cooperation.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the panel. Please join me in a big hand to the panel.
But please don't go yet. The reason I was trying to say that, let's try not to give 5 minutes for each speaker for the final question is because we have really good questions in the audience, and we promised the audience that we will use this interactive opportunity. So I've picked at least 2, if I may, Ole. One of them it has to do with a 5-year perspective. It more talks about 2 years, and it's Ola Njasta, the Norwegian journalist, who very specifically says, no, it's not 2 years, it's 10 years. 10 years from now on, how will the security situation have developed for the Nordic and Baltic states if the US leaves NATO? What is plan B? Who would want to take that? It's a really good question.
It's a very relevant question, but very difficult question.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest and say it will be difficult to see a NATO without US. It will be difficult. Will it have the kind of muscles that we're going to need in order to say that this is a good and important cooperation? Question mark. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Would you agree? Because you took...
Yeah, I'm sorry. But I think, Matti, you wanted to first? Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, our concern, of course, lies there. You know, what kind of a partnership will this be? Will the US still be part of NATO? I think and hope that it will be, but probably not in the same way as it has been before. So we have to be quite realistic in that. And I think that the discussion that you brought up before with, you know, how can we add to the whole Nordic-Baltic cooperation and add a few more like-minded states to that is kind of the way forward. And hopefully that will give us a little bit of a more security.
Matti, what would you say?
I would say that I've written something about Plan B, so I agree that we need to at least consider that. It might mean different things for the 8 Nordic and Baltic countries. So we must do more by ourselves, much deeper regional cooperation, and then having also bigger European powers involved. But of course, it wouldn't be comparable to the arrangement with the US.
Yeah, Mr. Lenkavičius, we would want to hear from you briefly as well. NATO will...
Didn't ask, but if you insist.
If NATO... would you...
You know, first of all, let me assume that they will not leave NATO. It's American alliance, basically. And when it's called like that, it's NATO, but everybody understands. And to leave NATO, it's not so easy. So it's another discussion. But plan B is to look at ourselves. We are not using our own potential. So let's not point to others. Let's not blame others. Let's not only consider what others will do. Let's do ourselves, because potential is enormously bigger than we actually using. And then we'll no need to now contemplate on any plans B or C. Let's make plan A working.
Very good. Let's look at ourselves now. That is something that everyone has agreed on. Christina, I direct one more question to you. Minority and integration policies were a dividing line for the Nordic-Baltic 8. Jakub is asking, has the rising securitization since 2022 caused these policies and values to converge? On integration, yes. Minority and integration policies. Jakub is saying that, you know, they did have a dividing line. It was a dividing line for the Nordic-Baltic Cooperation 8. So has anything changed, basically? That is the question.
I don't know if I totally understood the question on Nordic-Baltic 8.
Yes, and the minority and integration policies, you know, Nordic-Baltic 8. Do you think that anyone got the essence of the question and would want to comment on it? Pia, you are looking very suspiciously.
Yeah. I'm thinking. But could I answer? Maybe I could comment.
Okay, I will read it out one more time. Yeah. Minority and integration policies were a dividing line for the NB8. Before 2022. Has the rising securitization since 2022 caused these policies and values to converge? Did you ask that question? Would you want to expand and elaborate on it a little?
Yeah, I don't know still if I should be careful about answering a question if I didn't. But minorities as a focus area is important to the Nordic countries to have them included if that was it. But I think it wasn't quite what you were thinking about in this question, but we could take a talk in the break afterwards. And
I think this is what we'll do, because we will have a break. We will not be able to extend it very much, though, because we will have to continue here at 3:20, because we will have a foreign minister speaking, and he has a very strict timeline. That means that we have to come back here at 3. But before we do that, let's enjoy the coffee. Let's go to use the restrooms that are a bit further away, and let us come back here. And let's not do that without applauding the panel right now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you managed to have a short, refreshing break. And thank you so much for respecting the time slots and coming back on time. I'm seeing that there are people willing to network, but I promised that there would be a chance at the end. Before that happens, we'll have delightful conversations and a panel discussion. Before I introduce the next keynote foreign minister who's with us, I would also like to invite on stage another very important person, a distinguished president of the advisory board of GSSC, Elizabeth Bauer. Let's welcome her on stage warmly.
Thank you very much for having me here. Dear Minister Bouters, dear President of the Nordic Council of Lagerheim, dear Secretary General for the Nordic Council of Ministers, Lindeman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of the conference, especially Andreas Lindeman, is the director of the Nordic Council over here, and from the GSSC, Linus Kojala, the director of the GSSC, both with their teams, or I have to say, because not they can do it, but the teams have to do the work. Let me start first with a few personal words. It is about 11 years ago when I first attended to Vilnius. Then in another function, although I met a lot of Lithuanian politicians before and think tankers, but it's the first time I was in Vilnius at that time. And today, it's a first attendance in a public attendance as a president of the GSSC Advisory Board. I will take this opportunity to thank the GSSC stakeholders for the trust they gave to me, and I promise to do as much as possible for Lithuania and for the GSSC think tank. Sorry. But now back to the topic. Ladies and gentlemen, Nordic-Baltic cooperation, I'm the observer from the inside outside, as I'm a German. And I can tell you, when I started, it was a Baltic development, for instance, at that time, where Germany was in, where Russia was in at that time as well. So you can see already by getting this in mind, how much the time changed. And the main thing, we heard it already before, is that I think in the beginning, as somebody said, 5 plus 3. So in the end, it was on the way from friendship to partnership, the NBA, as it is today. And as it was so much said, the NBA is today more important than ever. And I think the cooperation is as well the best thing, how the way can come, not only by politicians, but by civil society as well. And the tasks facing Nordic-Baltic cooperation today look very different than 20 years ago, or 35 years ago. In recent years, the security situation has changed so drastically that cooperation in areas such as military affairs, defense, and energy has had to be significantly expanded. Russia is and will remain the dominant power for the foreseeable future. Furthermore, the region would be particularly affected by a further US withdrawal from Europe and NATO, which, in my opinion, necessitates further intensification of cooperation among the NB8 countries and with other European countries. The only possible path forward is therefore stronger together, even stronger than we did it up to now. And now I'd like to thank you. Sorry, my voice is missing. I can't do anything about it. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward for a good conference now, for the conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's get a quick poll on Slido again, just to ask you if the current Nordic-Baltic operation model is sufficient for today's security environment. If I could get the Slido picture, and if you could please choose one of the options. It's a multiple question that will give us some thought before any discussions that will follow afterwards. Is the current Nordic-Baltic operation model sufficient for today's security environment? Mostly yes, but it needs adjustments. No, requires significant adaptation. It requires fundamental rethink. No one thinks that it's a pure yes. No one thinks that it is sufficient for today's security environment. So one thing is clear, 66%, two-thirds of you think that it does need adjustments. Let's move to the sub-question of that, and it will be the last one. What is the main limitation of Nordic-Baltic cooperation today? Again, it's a multiple question, so we'll do it really quickly. Lack of strategic clarity, slow decision-making, fragmentation, insufficient political ambition, weak societal public dimension. I think you can only choose one, so whatever you find the most relative, please pick that. What is the main limitation of Nordic-Baltic cooperation today? Most of you, that is 1/3, say that it is political ambition. Thank you. On that note, I would like to invite Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome for a keynote speech.
Indeed, that's a very good introduction about the political ambition. Well, thank you for organizers for inviting me and Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues. This is a really big day, big celebration for Lithuania, for Nordic-Baltic cooperation, as the early establishment of the office of the Nordic Council of Ministers in Lithuania took place 35 years ago. It was a time when we were still in the process of consolidating our independence and had not yet secured full international recognition. That was before the first country recognized Lithuania's independence. The office was a clear expression of the Nordic countries' political will, trust, and support. Nordic countries were among the very first to offer Lithuania all types of close cooperation, donated military equipment to our armed forces, trained our military officers, and supported various projects related to democracy, education, culture, social and economic cohesion. Strong Northern advocacy also helped the three Baltic states to join EU and NATO. What began as assistance to emerging democracies has evolved into cooperation among equal partners and a model of excelling regional integration. During these 35 years, our region has transformed into one of stability, deep Euro-Atlantic integration, robust democracy, and economic dynamism. Shared values, democracy, rule of law, human rights, freedom of speech, strong civil society, and equal opportunities, all of them form the foundation of our cooperation. Our region has also built an extensive network of cooperation in the political, military, economic, educational, environmental, and cultural spheres. Today, the Nordic-Baltic region is closely integrated, with a population around 35 million people and forming the fourth largest economy in the EU single market. Our cooperation has evolved into an open, modern, and results-oriented partnership. One of the clearest examples of the added value of the Nordic-Baltic cooperation is our effective coordination in the United Nations and in the European Union, from joint statements and cooperation across UN bodies to regular alignment of positions within the EU. Cooperation within international organizations is an area where we should continue to invest. Acting together, we uphold and promote our shared values and interests, while strengthening the visibility and recognition of Nordic-Baltic region. Our countries can take pride in major achievements, such as Nord-Balt and East-Link interconnections, Baltic Connector project, and the synchronization of the Baltic electricity grid with continental Europe. We also see the regional impact of LNG infrastructure and rapidly expanding offshore wind projects in the Baltic Sea, alongside ongoing initiatives such as Rail Baltica and the Nordic-Baltic hydrogen corridor. I would also flag the key role of the Nordic Investment Bank in financing sustainable infrastructure, energy security, and economic development across the region. Beyond infrastructure, our cooperation is increasingly extending to emerging areas such as the development and deployment of artificial intelligence. Dear friends, given the current geopolitical environment, I would like to touch upon three ever more pressing issues for further Nordic-Baltic coordination and cooperation. Namely, strengthening our security and defense, stopping Russian aggression against Ukraine, and adjusting ourselves to the increasing global attention to the Arctic. Firstly, with Finland's and Sweden's accession to NATO, the entire Nordic-Baltic region has become a common domain in one more security area. We have become all allies, providing each other NATO Article 5 security guarantees. We, the Nordic-Baltic countries, need to lead, and we do lead, by example, to get all NATO allies on board to implement the 5% target as soon as possible. There is no alternative to urgently and significantly increasing defense spending if we are to close capability gaps and strengthen our defense industries. Advocating for more clearly defined and strengthened focus on defense of NATO's eastern flank is also critical, as it is facing the most imminent security threat. Secondly, Russia's aggression against Ukraine goes against everything our countries stand for: our interests, our values, our vision of European and global future. It is uplifting that we are living up to our values and doing what we must, standing firmly with Ukraine since the day of Russia's aggression. Ukraine needs guns, money, diplomatic support, which we do provide bilaterally on EU and on United Nations tracks. But Ukraine also needs hope for a better future. With Nordic-Baltic support, the EU has given hope to Ukraine by starting EU enlargement process back in 2022. Today, when the voices of skepticism and disappointment are growing stronger in both EU and Ukraine, we stand united in support of Ukraine's European path and full-fledged EU membership. Without this hope, Ukraine's fight would be much more difficult. On the other hand, in accordance with international law, we must continue efforts to ensure Russia's full accountability for crimes committed against Ukraine and continue strengthen sanctions against Russia to discourage, hamper, and finally stop its war effort. Third, Arctic is becoming an increasingly important area for global politics in both economic and military domains. The Nordic-Baltic cooperation could be reinforced in this area as well. Baltic region should be integrated into the future trans-Arctic maritime trade route network and become one of its key hubs. Our close commercial, industrial, high-tech cooperation should yield benefits also in the Arctic. I believe we will work together to create and implement the new European Arctic strategy. In the security domain, Baltic Sea region has ample experience on countering hybrid threats, including against critical infrastructure. It could bring strategic depth in case Arctic defense needs to be reinforced. And our shared transatlantic orientation and interests could help us jointly build trans-Arctic agenda with our key allies, United States and Canada. Dear friends, as we look to the future, the strengths of the Nordic-Baltic region will continue to rest on trust, shared values, and our ability to act together. In an increasingly uncertain world, this cooperation stands as more than a regional success story. It is a testament to what Europe can achieve when unity and responsibility prevail. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Budrys. Please be kindly seated on one of those chairs here. We will have a conversation. Joining you will be Živilė, who is the president of the Nordic Council. Let's welcome him by giving him a warm round of applause. And the conversation will be moderated by the CEO of GSSC, Linas Kojala.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our panel is conversation. So let's have a conversation. Please don't hesitate to write your questions on Slido immediately, because this is going to be a short, crisp talk. So I'll try to get to those questions as soon as possible, as the minister has to leave a bit early. So I'll start with you, Mr. Minister. Thank you for your intro, but I would like to ask about the current events. Obviously, there is an announcement of a ceasefire in Iran, and possibly some kind of change in the Middle Eastern security landscape. Also, yesterday, we saw General Secretary of NATO visiting Washington, D.C. and having a private conversation with President Trump. During the first panel, we already touched upon whether the US is going to be a part of European security architecture or not. So how do you assess the current state of NATO alliance and implications of that to the Nordic Baltic security landscape?
NATO is transforming itself, and we saw it already before the Hague summit. We see it now before Ankara summit. We all heard and contemplated on NATO 3.0 announcement and the plan that was that reached us from Washington, and we should embrace it, and we should follow this path. There will be no NATO as it was yesterday or day before yesterday. It is transforming. There will be more burden put on our shoulders, on European shoulders, and we have to meet it. And then we have to meet it with the increased defense spending and with the reviewed a bit ambition to do it faster than 2035 that we agreed in the Hague summit. There is no time for us to wait additionally 10 years plus, because we all know those deadlines are the ones that tend to be pushed further and then kicked a bit, because maybe another government will do something better, but not us. We have these tensions in our budget planning. It is happening everywhere. So I think that we should see the future, see the transformation, and also see the absolute need to have US involved in our security and defense. There are no alternatives. And each time when I hear the voices that, maybe Americans have to go alone with what they're doing there and there, I have a different opinion about US decisions, and maybe we shouldn't be involved there and there, and maybe Europe has more autonomy. What's the first indicator and the first number that I'm looking at? I'm looking at defense spending. And surprise, there is a correlation. The lower the defense spending, the bigger voices against US. And it tells us a bit about our stance. Whether we are lunatics here or whether we have the very different strategic understanding of our environment. If we are sharing the one of Hungary that sees themselves as the assistant to Russia, helping Russia to achieve their results, okay, that means that we are in a different boat. But if we see the strategic environment as it is, understanding that Russia is long-term direct military threat to us for the generation to come, we have to step up as the Nordic Baltics do. And that's why I see within the NATO this new bloc of the countries that are not only providing assistance, the major assistance to Ukraine, but also increasing their own defense spending, and then see the challenges as they are. And then we can add to this Poland, Germany, probably Netherlands, and there are not so many other countries that are following this path, this ambitious increase of defense spending. So I see the future of the defense and of the political ambition, and also of the security standards within Europe and NATO.
There's a lot of noise on social media, a lot of political statements that gain traction and in the public. But what do you sense when you meet US decision makers? You recently met Marco Rubio, your counterpart. You obviously visit the US often. Is there willingness from the American side to stay in the European security architecture on the operational, tactical, long-term planning level?
Well, there are some unknowns in the long-term strategic view of United States. Yes, and we have to, to guess sometimes. We have to advise sometimes. We have to ask, and it goes both ways. So it's not the partner where you just go, and ask and then get all clear answers and then go home and do your homework. It doesn't work like this. So of course we exchange on many things, but what is absolutely clear that they won't take responsibilities on their own as they see it. And we don't have to fight whether it is true or not true, and what 20, 30 years ago. We have to look to today's situation and to tomorrow and day after tomorrow. This is how we should approach the situation. And they're not stepping out. I remember President Trump in a Hague summit, when he just, opened his statement, his speech by saying, "I didn't come here to say that we are leaving. You have to do more." Same was with Secretary Rubio, not once. And we also heard it in other, calls for action in this NATO 3.0 plan or ambition. So we have to take it seriously. And I do not see it as the absolutely inevitable that the US will leave. If we will talk instead of doing things, yes, it might happen, but it will be about us even more than about Americans.
I think it's characteristic that I already see a question on Slido. I'm not answering my emails. I'm just looking on Slido app. That whether we can discuss the US as an ally or as an adversary in today's political circumstances. That's kind of one of the questions that we see from the audience already. But I don't ask you to respond to this. Maybe, Mr. Vairanen, could you speak a little bit about the political ambition? We had a Slido question just previously saying that, yes, Nordic-Baltic cooperation is going well. We are celebrating it, but there could be another kind of level of political ambition for the foreseeable future. What precisely you would like to see done in the next couple of years?
In any kind of cooperation, whether it's between Baltics and Nordics or within the Nordics, I want to see some concrete cooperation. It's not enough that we just attend to one another's meetings and give speeches, but we really have to have some kind of concrete vision, some kind of a strategy, what we're going to do in years to come. And I think we are in the right path, especially us from Finland. We have this tight mental connection to the Baltic countries, having the eastern border of NATO, having the eastern border of EU, and really realizing the realistic situation. As Minister was talking about NATO, US presence in the future, our responsibility for ourselves. And I think there are many ways to find each other as Nordics and Baltics in the future years. There's eastern border, there's Baltic Sea that ties us together, and we just have to realize that and still remember what Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, that there has to be some kind of a value-based realism in the international politics. We need partners, but then again, we heard and we know situation in Greenland, and we have to stick together in that sense also, and kind of balance ourselves in a realistic world, and still be strongly value-based societies and realize our strengths. And this is balancing, but no one said it's going to be easy.
Please, Minister.
Yeah, if to put in one sentence, I would drop the Baltic, from the Nordic-Baltic cooperation. No, seriously, and it doesn't mean that we will become, there was a joke some 15, 20 years ago, if you remember, how Baltics were becoming Nordic countries. But yeah, I guess this is the reality. I see how Nordic countries are becoming more Baltic in the way, someone would say more hawkish or more security-oriented, but this is already happening. For our agenda, there are also some items that were not so useful, not useful, but used to see, like 15 years ago, like development cooperation, more, soft security approaches, bringing more resilience to our societies, and all these elements that we developed currently that we are so proud of, they were coming originally as some blueprint also from Nordic countries. Even our total defense concept we would just copy it from Finland. It's like, and adapted in our situation. Of course, it was not so easy. So we are becoming more Nordic, and I see Nordics becoming more Baltic. And when we shape the different now geopolitical environment, when we talk about Arctic becoming natural, also connection to the Baltics, we will have the new geopolitical reality. We will have the new type of mentality. So there will be something new created. So why not this, the new Nordic concept, sort of. And additionally to the security cooperation, resilience building, to geopolitical reality where we are already connected, we have to put this separate item on agenda, that is geoeconomic cooperation. And it's not only the roots that I already mentioned, but also cooperation in the technology field and building the competitiveness of this region. We have this edge where we are a bit, faster, we're a bit mobile, where we can, coordinate among ourselves, and we have to turn it into the additional money and profits and more investment.
Well, let's recognize that we are at the university, so plagiarism is taken very seriously. But I think copying good documents from your allies is an exception. Maybe a couple of quick questions for the minister before you leave. There is a question on 6% on defense by 2027 for all the Nordic Baltic countries. Do you think that's feasible? Is that even considered? Obviously, Lithuania is not that far behind that number at 5.4%. But do you see our region going even further than that?
Well, I doubt that we will reach, all of us, 6%. And I think if I would, I would have to choose one line of effort what concerns defense spending, where we together have to put some effort, I would, sit on the plane, all of us, and then go to some of the countries that are not doing enough within NATO, because otherwise we are really at the risk to lose the NATO and transatlantic cooperation. We have all to increase spending, not part of the region, because it won't work like this. And before Ankara summit, believe me, there will be the moment of truth. There will be tables shown, and there will be numbers of 25 and then 26. And we will have to see each other into the eye and explain, so what's going on? So whether we have these plans realistic or not. So it's not only about us, it's also about the others. But what concerns our cooperation, of course, we have to do more. I remember before Finland and Sweden joining NATO, I looked into the Nordic defense cooperation and how this regional cooperation is functioning in the defense area. Because within the Baltics, we have problems. Surprise, of course we have. Because when we do one initiative procurement, they do, Latvians, Estonians do something different, and we always have to think about it separately as the separate independent reason to cooperate. So I thought maybe Nordics have the secret. And I was not surprised to find that it was difficult for them also. So when we have this new environment, we have to have the mechanism, we have to have some institutions, some secretariats, some people that do believe in our cooperation and push it further. So joint procurement and joint projects, this is the way forward. And we have already some examples like CV90.
And one last question before you leave, because we'll continue our conversation on stage. Ukraine, member of European Union, when and how? Like one sentence.
Well, this is truly complicated, and we believe in it. This is something that we do, what Nordic countries did to Baltic countries, assisting, bringing the best expertise, practice, sharing our lessons, and mistakes, and what worked, what didn't work. And I truly believe that they belong to European Union, not because of the empathy, but because this is our security interest. Because I'm really concerned about this country after the peace will be negotiated. What will happen with them if not Europeization, if not the huge reforms that they have to do in all the areas, from energy, single market, corruption, rule of law, you name it. Of course, they have to do the reforms. For us, the solution was assistance, believe in us, and Europeization. And that was the European Union. What is the alternative recipe for Ukraine? I don't know whether it exists. I know that Russians are already preparing the different recipe for the country, and that is another aggression, or there will be the civil war. I don't know what is in there, but nothing good for us also. So in purpose to avoid this huge security challenge for the continent, we have to take them with us. And of course we have to be ambitious. Because it's even putting the date 2030 is really ambitious to do all the reforms. It means that they have only less than 2 years to finish the negotiations, to go through all the chapters, understanding that even the first clusters are still closed because of Hungary. So I hope that it will be 2030, but we all have to step up.
Thank you so much. Nordic Baltics lead the way. The minister has to leave, but we'll continue the conversation. Please, a round of applause for the minister. Mr. President, we had a short conversation last night talking about what we can learn from each other. And one thing is clearly the quantity of saunas per person from the Finnish perspective, but also obviously the kind of resilience of the whole society towards any sort of aggression or threat coming from Russia. So what do you think we can learn from the Finnish experience? What is the Nordic experience, if we can talk about a more general kind of regional approach that is necessary for us as EU countries, as NATO countries in today's environment?
As a Finn, when I'm talking about preparedness, I'm not only talking about the aggression from Russia or somewhere else. It's basically this concept of comprehensive security, which is actually our presidential program for this year, and this goes all the way through the society. And we've just had pandemics. We might have natural catastrophes. Next pandemic is somewhere around the corner anyway. So we have to be prepared in many ways on all the layers of society, all the sectors of society, and it has to be on educational level, in schools, environment, infrastructure. It has to be military. So it's very much broad of a concept than only against specific nation's aggression towards you. Of course, it has to be also on the agenda, but it's a broad concept of comprehensive security. That's the point of Finnish model.
Another question coming from the audience is on international law. Well, our countries, relatively small countries, clearly depend on rules, on principles that bind us together, hopefully still. Does it really matter in today's adversarial world?
I hope it would, but everyone knows that this is why I was referring to realism and value-based realism. We still rely on rules, but on the other hand, we realize that everyone else doesn't, and we have to find a way to balance ourselves in the changing world. We know what has happened during the last years, 10 years, 35 years, and the world is changing, and we can't just stay aside and hope it to become what it used to be. And the realism at this moment is that we have actually partners, we have allies who doesn't think as we do, and then we have to adapt ourselves, respecting the rules, respecting our common values, but still having the realism to cope with our allies who we still need for years to come. And I still believe in the rule-based world order, but I have this sense that everyone else doesn't, and then I have to find a way to cope with it.
Another question is on partnerships beyond Nordic-Baltic 8. What other countries or regions could be of interest in terms of developing the partnership? What kind of questions could be added to the list of things discussed on the top political, but also civil society agenda?
Well, if we talk about different areas or adding areas, there is Baltic Sea. We have Germany. We have Poland. Then one specific area, of course, is Ukraine. That's something we never talk about enough. I had a privilege of visiting Ukraine last year, and I've met a couple of soldiers of them, and I really realized what they are doing for not just for their country, but for whole Europe and Western societies. And this is what I was referring to, having this connection with the Baltic countries, because further west you go, you might not realize it that as strongly that they are not only doing it for their own country, but they are doing it also for us. So adding Ukraine in the list is a top priority, whatever the cooperation then would be.
There's also a conversation about how the EU has to adjust to the new geopolitical reality by possibly changing its internal processes, maybe decision-making procedures, maybe getting rid of veto rights on certain issues, possibly including sanctions on foreign policy. Where do you think Nordic-Baltic countries as a group, because we usually, or at least quite often, talk about issues like that in one voice, could kind of lead the positive change, positive adjustment of the whole of the European Union?
Standing together. We are small countries, but as was said, we are 35 million people or so, and as an economical region, we are globally quite strong and big. But when it comes to affecting or acting in the EU, we have to do it together. There's a lot in EU at the moment. We have AI coming, and we have to deal with the regulation. We have to deal with ethics of AI, and there is a lot that has to do with EU structure of decision making in EU, veto rights, as you mentioned. So there is a lot of adjustments to do in EU, and if we want to really make a change there, we have to stick together and find a common way to act there, and I think we can find it because there's common base of values in these countries.
Yeah, clearly the common theme of this conference is the one that comes from Benjamin Franklin. Either we hang together or we all hang separately. So let's stick with the first scenario. Thanks a lot, Mr. President, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for that conversation. We will now have a very interesting panel debate, and I don't have a Slido for this, but I will ask for a quick hand raise. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that we are dealing with disinformation well? Is there anyone who thinks that we are doing enough? No one. Is there anyone who thinks that we are doing something, but we should be doing more? Yeah, basically everyone. Okay, so that will be, I think, a good context for the next panel debate, because it will be on disinformation and digital resilience in the Baltic Sea region, actors, narratives, and countermeasures. The panel will be based on an analytical publication on disinformation in the Baltic Sea region, but I'm sure that will be presented by a very well-known disinformation expert who will be moderating the panel. But before I invite him, I will invite the speakers. First, I would like to invite on stage Director of the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, Una Alexandra Berzina-Cerenkova. I hope that she is already coming up on stage. Welcome and thank you for being with us. Senior Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, Jussi Lassila. Welcome. Military Analyst at the Royal Danish Defence College, Jeanette Seritslev. I hope that I'm pronouncing it at least partly well. Let's give you a big round of applause and thank you for being with us today. Last but not least, Senior Analyst at the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, Frederick Foy. And Associate Professor at the Institute of International Relations and Political Sciences at the Vilnius University, Nerijus Maliukevičius. Have a fruitful discussion.
Thank you. Let us start the second stage of this drama in this theatrical environment, academic theatrical environment, second panel on disinformation and resilience. On a serious note, I want to remind you that when we had this first poll, everyone, majority of you voted that crisis prevention and resilience should be a priority of Nordic-Baltic cooperation. So we are under pressure in this panel to give some recipes. This panel is structured on the basis of our research report that is available both as a hard copy in the hall, so please pick up if there is still left. If not, there is a possibility to have it as an online version. Please indulge yourself, dive into it, but we have a kind of a teaser for this report because we have authors here of respected country chapters. And I would like to structure maybe our discussion in such a format that each author representing their country would share findings, results on research on disinformation challenges, resilience challenges. And maybe let's, afterwards, in the second phase of our discussion, go to the most important question, what to do, or how to proactively counter all the disinformation challenges that we are faced with. Maybe let's do it like that in the order of sitting. Una, if I may invite you to share the findings from Latvia, and then we will continue up to Lithuania, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nerio. And nothing introduces serenity as much in a conversation as sitting in a magnificent university hall, and also some humility, I would assume. So let me start with, as the research goes, the first part is patterns. And let me tell you that when we're talking about the Latvian information space, it's 3 states that come up. The first one is Russia, of course, and that's quite straightforward. We all know the playbook. The second one was Belarus. Belarus is interesting because the way Belarus acts in the region, especially in my country, is it's trying to show itself in a good light and kind of talk about Latvia as a failed state. That's why if you're planning to relocate to Belarus as a Latvian citizen, because, for example, you find liberal values to consuming, or you believe that perhaps somehow your political leanings will be better served, then the first thing you're going to get on the border is, you're going to get your passport checked, then you're going to have a conversation with the special services. And the third thing, there's going to be a blogger or a journalist in your face who's going to ask you, please tell us what horrible life you escaped from, and please tell us how thankful you are to your newfound home for this asylum. And these videos then, through an elaborate network, make it back to Latvia, and you would expect people to sort of understand that this is exaggerated, but no, it also sort of bounces back and circulates in Latvia, and that's of course a challenge. Now, who's the third player? The third player is interesting, and that is the People's Republic of China. Not a very visible actor, but a very specific one. If Russia's information manipulation, oh, and by the way, just quickly, when I wrote my chapter, I was not talking just about disinformation. I'm very on board with this new fancy schmancy FIMI concept, which is foreign information manipulation and interference, which does not, and we also have a couple of projects that we're involved in researching and developing this concept on EU level. It's not about whether or not information is true. This is not about Ministry of Truth. That's how we're sidestepping that dilemma. We don't have to prove whether or not there was a sexual crime committed against someone in Daugavpils by a, let's say, German soldier. We don't have to prove that that didn't happen, even though we know that that was disinformation. What we need to prove is how it made its way into the public space. It was amplified through bots. It was shared through very specific influencers, and so on and so forth. So it's about the instruments rather than trying to disprove every single claim that comes our way. So in this case, that has to be kept in mind. Now let me go back to China after this side note. The interesting thing, China is not like Russia in the sense that it is not across the board. China is not, it's a little bit like Belarus, but not like Belarus in the sense that it's not trying to paint Latvia as a failed state. China has 2 distinct features in Latvia. One of them is elite grooming and alternative elite grooming at that. So sort of trying to, well, foster the network of helpful people who are, if not openly pro-China, then at least not against it. And the other is information suppression. If you're planning to publish something that is critical of the official position, especially if it comes to China's core interests, you better expect a call, an email, someone on the street, something can happen. It doesn't have to be hostile, but you can connect the dots. Sometimes it's very official, and that's just diplomatic communication. Of course, that's within the realm of acceptable, pressure that we all face. But sometimes it goes beyond that, and that's an interesting thing. Now, quickly, now the second part: what to do. There's national. No.
Can we leave the what to do part on the second round of?
Gladly.
Yeah. So let's look into the problem and then let's go after it with our countermeasures. Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not couldn't comment on Chinese influence in Finland. Would be interesting, but sounds familiar that Chinese are really kind of. Careful about what he's saying, and then there are kind of immediate reactions. But I'm mostly focusing on Russia, and as you expected, it's the kind of the main perpetrator here. Maybe to start with, when it comes to Russian influencing on Finland, I could say that the field of information is in the margins somehow. It's a definitely thing we need to follow up. But regarding the history of for instance, since the end of the Second World War and our kind of very peculiar relationship with the Soviet Union, which of course created the concept of Finlandization. So I think these major patterns of Russian influence has been based on the forms of political kind of deals and kind of forms of political partnership, which was of course dictated in the Cold War era. And it continued in one way or another up to the February 22. And I think this is one of the critical periods, was from the Crimean annexation to the time of the full-scale invasion, when we still continued in a kind of business as usual, despite everything was changing. And this is of course another topic of discussion. But I would say that one thing which also explains, and this maybe comes to what we'll about and talk about this comprehensive security model. There are some historical reasons, and one peculiar note, what I pinpoint here, which makes the Finland particularly difficult terrain for Russian information influence, is that there are no major political representation of those potentially sympathetic voices for Russian narratives. So there are no such cleavages or divisions in society what Russia could facilitate. And I think this report is very valuable, showing that actually these Russian patterns can be detected everywhere in the Baltic region for that process. And I think this is one of the things which we should pay attention. So one of the peculiarities is that despite the Finnish party system shows, I would say, very typical modern European party composition with the forms of political polarization. Both, if we take the political extremes of our party life, for instance, the True Finns party, which shares all those, I would say, right-wing populist features, what we defect in Europe, they don't have these pro-Russia sympathies, which are pretty common, for example, in Central European cases. Another case is the Left Alliance, historically the successor party for the Communist Party. It has become a kind of a very left-green liberal, and they both reject and are very against Putin policies, but from very different standpoints. From the True Finns, it's maybe from this sort of a maybe the kind of stereotypic Finnish nationalism, while for the Left Alliance, it's simply an ideological thing that we cannot support any conservative thing. So this has remained, and this makes the situation in that sense quite safe. And I don't see here. For instance, last year there was a survey looking for Finnish citizens' trust in institutions and in media in particular. And what was very positive finding that actually the trust in the national media is higher what it was in the 1990s. So in that sense, that despite there are those all kinds of very suspective, conspirational, crazy narratives, anti-establishment narratives going on with the social media platforms, at least in these results, it seems that there is still pretty strong trust on the traditional media. What I would say that the thing which we should pay more attention is concerns our Russian-speaking minorities, and we have not paid too much attention to that. And it's very well known that it's one of the key priorities for Russian influencing. There have been quite a lot of cases, even years back, which shows a very blatant and I would say aggressive kind of interference. We do know that there's cultural differences, but also this sort of a large-scale skepticism and among the cynicism in Russian society, but also many Russian speakers abroad. And this can be also detected in Finland. And for example, when it comes to the quite revealing that there is an overall, among the Finns, the trust our national media broadcaster Yle is hovering somewhere around 80% or more. Among the Russian speakers is about 50. So there is a clear showing that they maybe don't trust automatically what the Russian media is saying, the Russian propaganda is saying, but also the same with the Finnish media. And this is becoming more and more, I would say, pinpointing the fact of how important is the general trust in authorities and institutions as a thing which I would pinpoint here as a major shield against information influence and keeping our terrain difficult for Russia. But potentially, I see that there are cases where this sort of a distrust can be found, and of course, there's some sort of points where there is no such a trust in authorities, and we do know that if such elements appear, Russian disinformation practices are immediately tracking that. Because the one point we need to understand is that we should not be too alarmistic, because the major vulnerability for Russia or the Kremlin is that they don't have such a soft power anymore. It's, I would say, they completely more or less lacking them, although they're trying to say that this is the major conservative center in the world. Well, I would say that nobody's buying that. What they are very careful and very skillful is to put the gasoline on the fuel, or fueling all these sort of grievances and divisions. And this is one maybe what they, in the case of Finland, but I think this applies to the Baltic Sea region in general. Maybe one thing which was also warned by our security service, SUPO, is that, and this is a little bit maybe paradoxical, that in the situation where our kind of a Russia expertise, and I'm maybe a little bit biased because I'm a Russia expert, but I'm a little bit concerned that for coming years it's becoming weaker and weaker, and maybe we are not aware of anymore what the Russia is doing. And this creates the situation of this sort of even a risk of kind of a paranoid situation that we are seeing Russian footprints everywhere, even in the cases where they are not. And this is actually serving if we follow the old Soviet model or the Russian model of the reflexive control, is that while lacking its own positive agenda, at least we could see it panicking or this kind of fear signaling. And I see also this kind of signs in Finland in some cases, and actually our security services warned that we should not say that, well, there's a broken window, only must be GRU or something like that. We should not do that, because it doesn't give a concise picture. But maybe I will stop here.
Thank you. How does the battleground in Denmark look like? What were your findings?
Well, there are many similarities to what you have just told about Finland, but there are also something that differs. I have also only focused on Russian disinformation, as Russia is the main threat actor in this domain in a Danish context. And what we see is no large-scale campaigns against Denmark, but we see a lot of low quality and also low quantity, meaning that we see accounts, Telegram channels, etc., with a few followers and a low reach, but still which have an impact in the information environment in some form or another. More often in a Danish context, we see single cases. Like, for instance, within the last year or so, we have had 2 cases of Russian disinformation. It has been publicly attributed as such. One was with a member of parliament after Trump once again claimed that he wanted Greenland, where the member of parliament, as a fake post from this member of parliament circulated, where he said that extreme situation called for extreme answers and that we needed to reach out for Russia for help. And of course, everyone in Denmark knew that it was nonsense, but it wasn't about reaching a Danish audience. It was about reaching foreign audiences. And just shortly after, we had another fake story about a Danish F-16 fighter pilot who should have been killed in Ukraine, also totally false. But it shows a common pattern that often the Russian disinformation is more about Denmark than directly targeting a Danish population. So it seems like the objective is more about shaping the perception of Denmark, maybe also in regards to Ukraine, or not maybe in regards to Ukraine, than directly influencing the Danish population. And there can be different reasons for that. One is, of course, we're a small country. So what's the effort? How much can you change if you change the perception or the opinion of the Danish public? But also, as you just mentioned, we are a high-trust society. We, in general, believe our authorities, our media, etc. Also, which is also important, is that there is a high degree of consensus in regards to the support to Ukraine at the political level, as well as in the civilian population. And there still is in 2026. And I have mentioned Ukraine already several times, and there's a reason of that, because that is the focal point in a lot of Russia's disinformation. But often we see Ukraine incorporated in other themes, in other crises, as the US threats against Greenland, which of course put a huge pressure on Greenland and the people of Greenland, but of course also constitutes a threat against the Kingdom of Denmark as a whole. And as you are all aware, in January, we saw at least till now, highest intensity in this crisis, which is, of course, is. And we saw Russian disinformation stories about that Zelensky had suggested to send Ukrainian troops to fight in Greenland in case of an American invasion. We also saw stories about that the Danish government wanted to withdraw F-16 fighter jets that we had donated to Ukraine because we needed them in case of an American invasion. And now my last slide. So what's interesting in that is that Russia has, of course, no interest in American territorial claim on Greenland or increased military presence in Greenland. But Russia has an interest in disruption and division, and they can use this crisis, these topics, which creates division within the EU, within NATO, between allies. Thank you.
I need to notice that Fredrik was not the author of Swedish chapter, but is totally, aware of all the challenges. He's representing FOI, and I would want to ask you what vulnerabilities you see. What Russian, target operations are in your country.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of you for being here and listening to this very, very important topic, and of course the previous topics as well. So the chapter about Sweden in this report was written by Martin Krag. He has been working against Russian FEMI longer than Kisilyov has been working with it. So when it comes to Sweden, and we're not the primary target for Russian FEMI at this point. However, they're constantly looking for chinks in our armor, so we resort to resilience building through whole of society approach. And we also, and this is outlined in the report. I work for the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency. We're not the psychological defense of Sweden. We are the enablers. The psychological defense is composed of all the stakeholders that are relevant to the resilience of Sweden. I was also asked, by our hosts to mention about the gaps concerning this particular forum when it comes to disinformation. And perhaps we can use that as a segue into the actual what to do about the problem. I had 5 minutes. I have 5 issues I would like to lift. So throughout my career, of course, there's been ups and downs, and one major disappointment was actually after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, when we saw that everyone stuck their heads in the sands instead of cooperating. That's more than a little unfortunate. Of course, we can blame the pandemic, we can blame many other factors, but this is, we can't afford to do this. So we also see that we're not in a kinetic war with Russia or anyone else for that matter. Yet we deploy enormous assets to FLF, to Baltic air policing, to maritime endeavors. And that is, of course, well and good. We are, however, in an information war with Russia. We do not engage in the same FLF-like activities of exchange, exercise, training that we all could benefit greatly from. So that's improving practical cooperation, especially for me as a practitioner, is one of these 5 areas. Una mentioned China. I will be brief on China, but China is a key enabler for Russia's war in Ukraine. Any change in the geopolitical situation around the Baltic with a more aggressive, or I should say even more aggressive Russia, would require Chinese support in one way or the other. How do you deal with this in the information space? The third thing is FIMI, and we see, especially over the last couple of years after the pandemic, how FIMI, the cognitive space, the information space, is being more and more connected to the other more physical threats within the hybrid scope of hybrid threats. So Russia is finding increasing use of the space that is conflict, what is not war. I am very concerned that they are planning for a forever war or a forever conflict to distract from Ukraine, remove sanctions, normalize Russia, and engage in bullying. Which brings me to my 4th point, response measures, response time. When we respond, we're far too slow. We typically also respond only as individual countries, not always, but typically. Is this the way forward? Should we consider joint responses? Should we consider many more simulations and exercises to actually train in how to respond to FIMI from our threat actors? Should we respond symmetrically or asymmetrically? Should we respond as governments, or is this somewhere where we can include public-private endeavors? And finally, the civic society cooperation, where government is not the only stakeholder here. So I would like to see much more joint resilience building through emphasizing our common past, our present, and our common values. And resilience must include endurance, stamina, and grit. Since we are facing authoritarian threat actors, they do not have to concern themselves with public opinion and elections. So we must be able to keep up with what especially the Russians are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. I would like to add a Lithuanian piece of the puzzle here as well. I authored a part on Lithuanian challenges. To be brief, before we really jump into the question of what to do proactively, I would probably concentrate on the findings of a big data set that was gathered with my colleagues from fringe sites in Lithuania that are a network of spinning Russian propaganda narratives. And the finding on the narrative part was that the thing that was already mentioned frequently here, it's all about trust and mistrust. And the major railway that brings all the other narratives to the final destination is the mistrust into Lithuanian institutions, mistrust into Western alliances, and so on. And all other things that may be, contemporary, like, security issues or war in Ukraine, it is added as a kind of one additional wagon to the whole train going to this destination. So this mistrust, fueling mistrust and doubt is really the major challenge here. And another part in the chapter on Lithuania is really the qualitative change in the whole operations. We are really following through the kinetic and physical aspect of influence operations happening in our battle environment, I would call. And all things are included: arson attacks, attacks against our monuments, and the use of media technologies, social networks, is like a tool set to implement those operations, meaning Telegram channels being the tool to recruit teenagers to implement those operations and so on. And therefore I have like a rhetorical question, maybe, after the research that I went through. Are we really still on the information battleground environment, or, as Estonian general last year has put in the conference in Vilnius, is this really a kind of a battle-shaping operations by Russia that are already overspilled into totally new challenges? But I will stop here, and I will turn to this main question. Let's stop appreciating the problem, because I think everyone understands the problem, right? So, Frederick, you started already what can be done. Sorry, Una, I cut you short, so please continue on the question. What really can be done proactively, systemically in challenging all those risks, please?
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly reflect on the trust topic, and especially us, those that have studied Asian studies and are China scholars, including myself, we see that actually it's a conversation of, the nature of the man. What is it a virtuous being? Is it a neutral being? Or is it a vile, someone who will steal an apple from the table if you turn your back kind of being? And I think that's the clash. We in the Nordic Baltic 8 ultimately believe that they're not going to steal that apple from the table if we turn our back. Whereas the system that we're dealing with actually believes that the only way towards any sort of control is imposing these very strict kind of ideological, I guess, boundaries on people. So we will not be able to solve that, is what I'm saying. But we are able to counter that a little bit. And I would say that given the nature of this conference, and this is not me quoting from the text at all. This is just, it's not what I wrote. But given the nature of the conversation here, I would say, let's look at this at 3 levels. Let's look at it at national level, NB8, and EU level, knowing that not everyone is in all 3 or in both, but So on the national level, let's keep our public broadcasters alive and kicking. And I believe, sitting here today, that it is a problem that your country has, my country has. In Estonia, there's conversation about funding. You mentioned the Finnish public broadcaster. I think we have an amazing tradition of public broadcasters with teeth. Let's not keep our short-term political interests and our egos from supporting these amazing structures that we've built. Is my first. But there's more on the national level. But let me just strike with that one bullet. Now, on the regional level, information sharing. This is why Frederick and I work so well together. This is because whenever something happens in one of our countries, be it on the Baltic level or on the NBA level. We immediately call each other, we signal each other. We're like, are you seeing this? When a Latvian French politician goes to a rally in Vilnius, my friends are going to send me a picture asking, is this a big deal? What should we expect? So that pooling of knowledge, because we are facing at the end of the day a common attack, right? And now on the EU level, I have to say that regulatory power of the EU is still there. I was just, when I was looking into the Digital Services Act, I think that's a great tool because it brings the platforms back from saying, oh, we're just a public forum. Well, even if you're just a public forum, let's acknowledge two things. A, public forums have to be managed so that, voices can be heard. And two, election time is a very special time. So actually, as per DSA, you're allowed to say that. You are allowed to push for these platforms to introduce, I believe, like it's a month period, right, before the election, where you monitor for fake accounts, where you monitor for funding, illicit funding coming into some political campaigning. So I think, and now with that cake, with those 3 layers of responses, I think we're actually doing pretty well.
Okay, not much to add. I definitely agree that this is a very great step and good step to on the EU level to make a more systematic approach and control on this social media platforms. And maybe this is a kind of an indication that we are coming, but always a little bit like lagging, like the reactions in everywhere. If you think about that, how the Europe has awakened in its aids and military aids, but in general, the position in helping Ukraine, how it started, and it's still the question about that. It's coming, but it's coming a little bit too slow and lagging behind. I would say that, of course, from the Finnish viewpoint, I would say that how to maintain the situation as good as it is now, and I would say that maybe this is maybe sound banal, but I think that we should see very kind of or anticipate those situations where this sort of a mistrust or seeds of a mistrust are becoming more to the fore, and there are, of course, and I would say that we are still, if you take a look at the in Finnish political discussion or this sort of an identity politics debates and all this, which is a very common, as I mentioned, follow very typical European patterns. I would say that, of course, there are plenty of opportunities for the Russian Fimi type of behavior of feeding those, but so far maybe as mentioned that Sweden has not been a priority. Finland applies as well, but this could change. But so far we have had this kind of a shield that there have been different attempts all the time is happening all the time when it comes to that. That the true opinion is that Finns do not like NATO, but there is this typical CIA or American type or now EU type of conspiracy which turns to Finnish decision makers. This is a very common narrative coming up, and they are actually using that regularly, and if there's a better moment that they will repeat it again. Or now about one thing which maybe to what we should see and anticipate in this kind of situation where we see no end in the war in Ukraine or the Russia's aggression there is that we need to have a clear model and justifications, and this applies to politicians, to justify the need of assistance of Ukraine. Because what I see also in Finland, that there are slight signs of war fatigue. And this is a moment, if we think of one of the priorities for the Russian information is that to feed that why would you pay more for social security instead of putting those money in Ukraine? And there are in Finland what I would say that there are regional differences. There are economic difficulties, especially in eastern Finland. The lack of or the border closure, there is a major economic impact of losing trade with Russia. So far, there is a large consensus of the necessary of these means, but I would be prepared for also those voices, which we, by the way, already hear among the Russian speakers. But I would say that Russian speakers are here is a good example. It's not only because of their Russian and their closeness to the Russian society or culture. It's also about how they sense this sort of a general societal frustrations. And this could become also part of the Finnish population as well. Why we should pay money for Ukraine? We have own problems. And this is thing which, because we see here that this information field is very comprehensive. It's not about detecting what's happening in the narratives, but what's the general societal context.
Trust is essential, and we have to protect it, and we have to invest in it. And I can only agree with you. Public service media are so crucial in that regard. And what is important when we're talking about trust, that's also understanding that there's no guarantee that it will continue like that. I don't think I'm the only one in the room who was shocked to see what happened during the pandemic with the conspiracy thinking, the mainstreamization of conspiracy theories, and the anti-vax movement, of course. And what was also striking was to see that these voices on February 24th of 22 at once become pro-Putin and anti-Ukraine. And they still are, but it was very, very illustrating in the first phase of the full-scale invasion. And sometimes I say that these voices are only a new crisis away from being potentially utilized by Russia within our societies. And then, in this close setting, I also think that we should acknowledge that a lot of Russian and pro-Russian disinformation propaganda are being amplified within the MAGA universe and from the MAGA universe re-entering Europe. And to be honest, I still think that we lack a good way of approaching this, talking about it, addressing it, and also ultimately countering it, or at least try to mitigating it, because that is a huge problem. So that's some of the problems. We should look at Ukraine within this domain, because there's a lot we can learn from them. Before the full-scale invasion, we talked a lot about debunking. Since the full-scale invasion, we have looked in Ukraine and learned that pre-bunking is better. But we are still mostly talking about it. I don't see that we're doing it that much. And when I say we, that could be Denmark, but also on an EU level. And as you said, Una, the EU is doing a lot within this domain, and that is actually very, very good. Also, I think that we should recognize this cognitive resilience as part of a broader societal resilience. And that's also something we can learn from the Ukrainian approach. And then lastly, and it's very untypically for me, but I will end on something positive, because I actually also think that we should acknowledge that we are doing a lot more than we did just 5 or 6 years ago, on a national level, but also on an EU level. And I think that's very positive. So yeah, we can do more, but we are doing more. Of course, we can do better, and we will. Thank you.
Fredrik, would you like to add something to this proactive stance from your side?
Well, you'll see, the Seeds of Distrust sounds a bit like the prequel to Grapes of Wrath. Looking at we've all mentioned Ukraine, which is very important, but we should also look at where Russia's active in other areas, how they act. What does it mean now with the Armenian elections? How do we continue to work with Moldova? Like with the Armenian elections, the current prognosis is that Russia will be using their entire playbook, but they are not introducing any new tactics, techniques, and procedures. What happens if they do? What happens if they get help from, say, the Chinese in introducing new ways of using AI? Complacency is something we cannot afford.
Okay. Thank you. I think we are really short of time, and Slido is suggesting questions for us as well. I would like to turn to our audience, and they are actually wishing us to be more proactive on our recommendations. I would use this specific question from one of the audience member, which, okay, I will reformulate, we are discussing defending ourselves from bad actors. Should we be discussing an attack model? You mentioned, the positive human nature when we are actually facing the very aggressive actor. And yes, in defense sense, we all in the chapter speak about the layers of defense, civic, institutional, other layers. But aren't we short of this one further step forward? Shouldn't we be actually engaged in this battle, in the battlefield? To provoke you, how it could be done, or what would be maybe our opportunities and Russian vulnerabilities in this respect. So can I just invite everyone to react as you wish? Yeah.
So this question is spot on, because this is something that there's been a psychology change in the FEME approach, and now we're having the fourth FEME report on EU level, EAS, and it does speak about a more sort of proactive, perhaps not as far as offensive, but kind of just, anticipatory, in a sense, approach. But one thing is clear, is we're not going to bombard Russia with disinformation. And by the way, we have enough success stories that we don't have to invent new ones, unlike some other players in this field. But what we do need is we need to tell these stories more. And sometimes we need to invest money to do this. And I'll go back to the Belarus case. So there were, in the Latvian media, several stories about people who moved to Belarus and then, or went there for some cosmetic procedures or medical procedures, and then got arrested. And got arrested, one guy got arrested because he complained a little because he had a business there. He complained a little to his friends that the tax system had somehow not delivered the way he wanted. I mean, that's cause, right? But there's another story when it was just a hostage being taken, because we know that Lukashenko has this hostage diplomacy approach, right? And when you interview these people, they say, we had no idea that this can happen. And then my question is, how is it that we are not informing those people? How is it that they haven't heard that this could happen to them? And when asked whether or not that would have changed your choice, they say, yes, it would have played into my calculation. So I don't think we need to introduce active measures, Cold War style, vis-a-vis Russia in the information domain, but I just think we need to play to our strengths even more.
Yeah, mostly agree, but I'm personally, I think that we should be more active of exploiting Russia's vulnerabilities. Also in the information field, we have cases there, and I could see one example which could work more effectively. We do know that there are plenty of pretty good stuff among the emigrated Russian oppositional media about all this rottenness of the Putin system and all kinds of revelations, and providing very important, potentially important kind of information, the objective, or maybe if it's not purely objective, but in any way the information which rejects and challenges this sort of a Kremlin propaganda. The problem is that it's becoming quite, I would say, the relatively marginal impact within Russia and also among the Russia's political establishment. There would be a more impact if Western politicians would be more aware about this, even by knowing Russian language or something as a simple, just a symbolic act. But there is a recognition that if a Western politician or authority is saying something which hits the spot, there will be a reaction. And I think every time when Maria Zakharova or some other propagandist reacts this very angrily, we have succeeded.
Yep, I happen to agree, but I understand the question, but it's also very important that we stand on our values, which we're also talking about today, and as a liberal democracies, we will always be behind in this battle. But I just think that it's very important that we don't fall into the trap of just answering with more disinformation into the Russian information space. We shouldn't do that. We could do more strategic communication proactively. Yes, we could, but it should just still be truthful and credible. Thank you.
going back to the question of should our responses be asymmetrical, I think I'm a bit more hostile than Una's here. I think we should engage much. No, I firmly believe we should engage in measures that are perceived as being deterrents, so that Russia will think twice. Would this mean perhaps asymmetrical responses, that instead of responding in the information space, we use some other component of our toolkit? That's up to the decision makers, but we should really develop our options in all domains.
Dear colleagues, thank you for being such on time. We are, 4 zeros in front of us. I cannot stop plainly here without acknowledging the partners that helped publish this report. Global Geopolitical Security Studies Center, the partners from Swedish Embassy and Swedish Institute, and of course the ongoing effort by Nordic Council to support research on disinformation and propaganda challenges here, and all the media literacy initiatives. So thank you for being in the region on this effort as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of the panelists. Thank you for the fruitful and insightful and a deep discussion on disinformation. As we are approaching the very final conversation of today, it is high time we thanked our online audiences. We were broadcast by the LRT, Lithuanian Radio and Television website. Thank you those who did watch us online. You just finished watching the Shared Values, Shared Security, the Nordic-Baltic Partnership at 35 and the Path Forward conference. Shall we do a little, round of applause for them to be leaving us? Thank you.